So I'm very excited for today's conversation. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Shai Reshef, and I'm the founder of WAYE, an organization that prepares both youth markets and businesses for the future of work and life with advanced technologies. And so what we've witnessed in these last few months is an acceleration into the digital future. But we've also been granted a unique opportunity to reposition ourselves and our systems to better prepare us for what's coming. And I can think of no better group to prepare us for the future of education than who we have today. So we have our first panelist is Shai Reshef, the president of University of the People, which is the world's first tuition-free, nonprofit, accredited online academic institution, which is dedicated to opening access to higher education. Then we have Dr. Poornima Luthra, an award-winning educator both at the master's and undergraduate level. She's external faculty at Copenhagen Business School and the founder of Talented, an organization that helps nurture inclusive workplaces to harness the value of cognitive diversity. And then we have Dr. Ulieru, Chief Alchemist of Singularity Net, President of the Impact Institute for the Digital Economy, and Global Agenda Council Advisor and Consultant for the World Economic Forum. So we have quite the group today. And so for my first question, I would like to ask you, Shai, you've built a remarkable university, the first tuition-free accredited university, but then it's also online, a distribution model that almost every higher education institution has had to pivot to in the last few months. How has demand for University of the People been impacted by COVID-19? And how do you think higher education institutions should reposition or respond in the post-COVID world? What should they do differently as it relates to accessing higher education?
Well, for us, we were around from 2009, and from 2014, when we were first being accredited, we double every year. But the pandemic actually accelerated the growth. We just started our last term. We have 5 terms a year, so the last term started in April. We started with over 31,000 students, wow, which is over 7,000 new students who came to us because of the pandemic. Many of them because of the pandemic, either because they were quarantined and they felt that that's the best time to complete their education, either because their schools were closed down and they said, let's go online, we'll see if they stay with us, or go back to their schools, or a lot of new people who were laid off and feel that they need the education either to complete education or to switch a career in order to have a better chance for the new job. So for us, it's a great growth, and we see this growth just to continue in the next term and in the future, just because the situation is getting worse worldwide. The recession in the world will send many more people back to school, and we see them coming to us. I think that the online, while it used to be marginal, and universities look at us and said, well, you're not the real thing. Face-to-face is the real thing. Now we became the mainstream and everyone tried to imitate us because online is actually the only way to teach if you want to teach. And, if you look at some countries, such as in the Middle East, where they don't recognize online, now they're stuck. They have no option whatsoever. Now, while online is not, going to Zoom is not really the online is much more than lectures on Zoom, and there is a lot for universities to do in order to prepare themselves for teaching online. No doubt that this is the future, and the world is going to be a different world in the future in terms of online compared to face-to-face.
Mm-hmm. And so you think it would be wise for universities to now always offer some form of online option, or to at least start exploring what that could look like?
I think that it is the end of the school system as we know it. I think that online is a must. It's not anymore a privilege. It's not nice to have. Either you have online and some of your classes are going to be online or you won't be there, either because of social distancing. What do you do with kids who don't want to go back to school in the fall? Either you teach them online and you do it properly, or you lose them. Second, online is way cheaper than face to face. And when you look at what's going on in higher education, the cost of higher education in most part of the world is going up and up and up. Recession means that a lot of people won't be able to afford it. Governments cut the cost of higher, cut budget for universities. So more and more universities have smaller budget. They need to cut their cost. The way to do it is through online. So online is the future. Whether they like it or not, this is the future, and every university better prepare itself for this future. Otherwise, they won't exist. So it's online or nothing.
I absolutely agree. And I think now there's never been a better time as we hit pause slightly to start exploring and repositioning properly. Dr. Luthra, in an article you wrote for the World Economic Forum, you stated that the COVID-19 crisis may teach us about how education needs to change to be able to better prepare young learners for what the future might hold. What are some of the ways that you think these systems should change? Oh, I think you're on mute still.
Sorry, there I am. That's a really good question. And I think we need to, what COVID-19 has done is really allowed us to, or given us the opportunity to step back and to think about what we're really preparing our students for, right? Whether it's primary, middle, or high, or tertiary, students. And I think that it's really important for us to think about what are these skills that we're preparing our students for. And there are a list of them, right? There's resilience and adaptability and flexibility. There's the need for emotional intelligence and humane, leadership qualities as well. There's, of course, creativity and innovation that we want to see. And these are all really, as much as I don't like the term soft skills, they are those skills that need to come through in an educational program at the end of it so that our students, our children are actually well equipped to be able to face what they're going to be facing in the future. And COVID-19 has really been that test for so many of these things for us to reflect upon what we need to prepare our students for. I mean, if there was a time to look at the resilience and adaptability in young people, this was it, right? You could see young children perhaps being more resilient and adaptable than any of us adults were. And these are the skills that we want to see develop in more constructive ways into the future as well. I mean, if we just think about the fact that many of the jobs by 2030 don't exist today, right? Both World Economic Forum as well as Dell Technologies project that 65 to 80% of the jobs in 2030 don't actually exist today. So if we think about that, what are we educating students for? And that really makes us really have to take a deep dive look into what are the skills that we're really training them for, teaching them for, educating them for. And it is these skills around resilience, adaptability, creativity, innovation, the emotional intelligence skills. And we need to think about how we're actually in a formal way helping our students learn these skills.
Absolutely. I think that's incredibly important. And the soft skill, I know soft skills, it makes them seem less important, but we also have to view them as the skills that can't be automated, the skills that a machine can't do. And so I think that that's why it's so critical. Have you noticed, I know some schools in Denmark prioritize play, for example, and play as an actual lesson. And that, would you say that that could be something that more schools should consider adopting?
Absolutely. So we moved to Denmark about 5 years ago, and it's been so beautiful to see children play and play for a significant period of their school day. And it is through play that a lot of these skills, particularly the social and emotional skills, are actually developed at very early stages. Learning to work through conflict and negotiations, and working with people who are different from you in terms of their skills and their perspectives. And those are the real skills we need, and they start really young. And I'm often in the last week been reminded of Alvin Toffler's quotation, right? To be illiterate in the 21st century is not to be able to read or write, but it's really about whether we can learn, unlearn, and relearn. And it is that continuous learning that we want students to have. And it goes beyond the, the textbook education that we've been so focused on in so many parts of the world. And we still are in many educational systems, still focused on that. The reality is we are educating a generation, the YouTube generation, the generation that has everything at their fingertips. It's a mouse click or a couple of clicks away to find out anything that they want. And so we really need to question the value that we are adding as educators. And that is really the heart of it. And in moving forward, it has to be these skills, these life skills. I think that's a better way of looking at it. These life skills that are more difficult for us to be able to teach and imbibe and educate, but it is really the direction we need to take, because at the end of the day, whether it's AI or the equivalent that's going to take over many of those jobs that can be done, or access to information that is already available, it is these skills that you can't replace, the human interaction. And if COVID-19's taught us something, I'm sure any of us who've been in isolation will know that we've craved social interaction. We've craved being around people. We've craved hugging people. In Denmark, we've had our children go back to school. And one of the biggest challenges has been keeping children apart, because that human nature is to go and hug and be around our friends. So this is a generation that is really growing up with these very, very profound impact that they have experienced with COVID-19. And social interaction is something that they're going to really want to hold on to. And part of that are these life skills of emotional intelligence and learning how to work effectively with other people.
Absolutely. And that bridges in right to my next question. Dr. Ulieru, a big question or conversation that's happening right now in the tech space around education is the end of the learn, work, retire. And that these lockdowns may provide education systems a chance to position in a way that engages the learner in learning and actually teaches them how to learn. Can you talk to us a bit more about why it's so important that schools pivot to prepare for this, the end of the, educate somebody for the first 25 years and hope that that is enough for them? Why is it so important from a tech perspective that we teach learners how to learn?
Yes, it's a really fundamental question, and it's absolutely aligned with the shift which we are talking about, which is ensuring not only access, as our first speaker was saying, as well as an opportunity to depart from creating or teaching or molding standardized human robots for factory or office jobs, which will be taken over by AI systems very soon. So it's time to teach people to immerse themselves and prepare them for the creative economy. And how can we do that? So lifelong learning, of course, for those who have to catch up on things. But in the first place, to look at learning as a state of spirit. From when we are born, that's what we do. We learn. And we learn through play, exactly as our second speaker underlined. So this is absolutely important. So I have created, of course, serious gaming, all sorts of infrastructures. Now with technology, with the virtual reality, we can immerse students inside the classroom so they can envision themselves sitting in the same place, in the same spot in which they held in the classroom, and they can participate actively in those kind of experiences, but also to have online infrastructures that enable this continuous learning process. One important trend is also, opening the opportunity for students to take more agency, exactly as you are saying. So it's not that we are teaching students or those who want to learn how to learn, but they can take accountability for their own learning. And as we give them these free opportunities to enroll in courses, to create their own curricula, we have to be more creative from the educational system perspective to create on-the-spot diplomas for those students which are tailored to their aptitudes, which are tailored to their talent and passions. So we will have to invent a lot of specializations, much more personalized than the standardized ways in which we are doing it for now. And of course, technology is there. Technology is ready, and it was there for a long time.
Absolutely.
We just have to use it wisely.
And I think, and when it comes to lifelong learning, I know one study in Australia showed that the average young person graduating in the next few years will likely hold 17 jobs across 5 different industries throughout the course of their career. So if that stat can help you understand why continuous learning will be the future, you know, that kind of solidifies it. And Shai, on that note of student agency, what we've seen is that some of the schools that have successfully dealt with this crisis a little bit better, and there's, you know, many reasons why schools are, you know, different positioned to handle this crisis, but schools that have really developed a sense of student agency, ownership over their own learning, have dealt with the crisis a tiny bit better. Students that understand their role in the learning process. So since University of the People is entirely online, how do you build this skill set around student agency, and how can other schools start to do the same? I think you might be on. Oh, I think you're on mute. Sorry, I apologize. And it's there we go.
Sorry.
No problem.
So first, the students should be at the center. And the entire process of learning should be around the students, not around the professor lecturing. We build a system where you design the entire course in advance, divided by weeks, and every week there is the lecture where the students are supposed to learn the material. We send them to watch videos. We send the students to read material. And then actually the entire learning process happens all along the week through discussion between the students. So we have a peer-to-peer learning pedagogy where the students interact with each other every day between themselves, with the instructor every day in the class, monitor the discussion, answer questions, correct mistakes, but is there for the student. So in order for online to succeed, you need the students to be very interactive. They need to interact with each other. They need to interact with the instructor. The instructor should be there every day for the student. It's not that you give a lecture once a week and you go home. You should be there every day for the students. And the students need other support. They need someone to help them with technology if they have issues. They need, if they have other technical issues or other administrative issues, there should be someone for them. So it's an interactive process between the students, between themselves and the instructors all week long. And actually, you make the students part of the process. By the way, peer-to-peer learning means that you learn from your peers and you teach your peers. And the ability to get feedback from your peers and accept it. This is hard. To give feedback, constructive feedback to your peer is also hard. So it's a process that you learn, but you open the student's mind. You teach them how to teach themselves and to teach others and get feedback from other students from around the world. And if you do it right, you also expose them to other cultures, which is another great benefit for the student.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And there was a study done by IBM that interviewed about 300 CEOs across the world, and they said that adapting to the future of work, upskilling and reskilling is something that they expect employees to do on their own. It's not something that CEOs feel that they're responsible for. So student agency, developing that when you're younger in life, is actually going to be critical in the future of work, as we'll need to pivot and upskill and reskill, but we'll have to do that on our own. So empowering students to understand their role in learning, I think, is very important. And Dr. Ulieru, we did say a little bit about some of the skills for the future of work. And Dr. Luthra did point out that 65% of the jobs don't exist yet. And the jobs that we do see today, a majority of them will be augmented, if not fully automated. So from both a humanities and a STEM perspective, what are the types of skills that we should be focusing on? Because I know a lot of parents do have questions. Is STEM also the priority? Because we know that some of those jobs can be automated, but at the same time, it's important that students understand computer science. Oh, and I think, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And so, critical thinking obviously is the first thing that we have to immerse students into from the very beginning, rather than regurgitating. So that is a radical shift from how we do it now. Even the testing on multiple choice, I think that is, at least it's inviting them to think and to make choices. But critical thinking, critical analysis, STEM is still very important. However, if we do not teach them together with the social sciences, with the philosophy, the humanities, what are they going to apply STEM for? So, the question to be answered here, why are we doing what we're doing? What are we doing with these infrastructures? And therefore, it is absolutely critical to combine, yes, the STEM, the hard sciences, and the soft sciences, which have been separated again by a wall before. It is much more important now, and I call it, this. I mentioned competitiveness. Yes, so students now, and we have to allow them to choose their teachers as well, because as our first speaker was saying, it's not centered anymore around the professor, around this stern image of God to which students bow, but it is centered now. The student is at the center of learning, and they should have the choice for the best teacher to teach them. And then the choice, of course, is the choice of a university. So it has to, maybe I'm going too far into the future, but I live in the future. So they can really choose the best education for themselves and have access to it if they so choose. And that is also a learning in itself, learning for accountability for themselves, and in addition to critical thinking. So we are going to create leaders of the future for this creative economy who will be well aware of their passion and where they can contribute best. And then everything will emerge naturally, because they will find their space in the teams in which they will engage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really important, because we do talk a lot about, more in the tech space, how digital worlds will open up hiring. You can work in any country essentially, because you just kind of log into your office. But that same thing would apply to the teaching world. As we shift to more digital platforms, it does open the pool to what students have access to. And Dr. Luthra, in your latest article with the World Economic Forum, you talk about how younger generations see a power of working collaboratively to solve some of the biggest challenges. And of course, it is this younger generation that will be solving the climate change, writing codes of ethics for AI. But education systems traditionally put these disciplines in silos. You have science, you have business, you have communications, and we force students to kind of pick a direction at a very young age. What are some ways we can combat this? Because the problems of the future are interdisciplinary, and we need the physicists talking to the philosophy majors. We need everybody working together. So how do we do this in action in schools?
Absolutely. I think that's a really important question that we need to address. Again, keeping at the base of it, at the heart of it, the need to educate the current, young generations that we have of Generation Z and Alpha, as well as the generations to come, with those life skills that we talked about. But it goes a little bit further than that. I think that this whole idea of a 4 to 5 year undergraduate degree is something that we really, really need to question, and we really need to rethink, focusing on an engineering degree or a physics major or a computer science major. I think that is really looking at it the wrong way around for the future. I think it is module based. I think if we go back to this idea of continuous learning, we are going to have to rethink universities to provide education that is more modular. And in doing so, we allow students to take a range of modules across various disciplines and almost be the champion and the captain of creating their own kind of skill set that they desire, that they think is going to be useful for the kind of work that they want to do. We have to remember that these young people who are, being educated right now and will be in the future have a very, very strong desire to make a difference in the world. They're being brought up differently than any previous generation. And they have seen firsthand with COVID-19 that actually we can make a difference. If we changed action, we can reduce pollution. And they've seen that that correlation exists, which means we're going to see much more of this collective agency and this strong student agency coming through. And they're going to want to dictate the kind of education in the areas, this interdisciplinary body of knowledge that they individually want to create for themselves. And then universities, we need to provide that for them by allowing a module-based kind of education. And I recently heard someone talk about this idea that, education in the future is not going to be, taking time off, going to a physical campus. We know that that's possibly something of the past. As Shai mentioned as well, it's probably going to be largely online, or at least some degree of blended learning. But I think it's going to go one step further as well to that, to say that it's going to be integrated into workplaces. You could have, various entrepreneurial, companies coming together, sharing workspaces, along with having some kind of university on perhaps the ground floor, where in between your work, you come down, you do your module, and you go back up and continue your work. Some kind of, fusion between education and work is what we're going to see. And that ties in beautifully with that idea of continuous learning, because it is not a period of time in your life that you take off, you learn, you get a degree, and you move on. It is this idea of continuous learning. And so it's going to be a much more blended way of looking at it between work and this whole idea of education and continuous learning. And I think that that's where we're possibly hopefully headed. And in that way, people are, students will have that opportunity to have that interdisciplinary work. But that requires universities to then provide more modular based education, rather than, a deep dive into certain, subjects or areas, like you said. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think even at the primary and high school level, that would still apply, where teachers are giving projects collectively. The math teacher is working with the philosophy teacher, and then the students, when they go out to play, can work on those kind of more holistic projects versus introducing them to silos at such an early age.
Yeah, and I think that there are education systems out there that are doing this. The IB system, for example, is one that does have this very strong, exactly what you said, that, there's a unit of inquiry that really underpins all the different aspects, whether it's math or science or music or art or drama. And I think what COVID-19 has done, at least for me as a mom of 2 young children, is it's forced me to understand the IB system much deeper, as I had to homeschool and remote help my children with remote learning. And it's really that kind of education that we want to see across the board. I think one of the things I want to say is that there is a real gap in the kind of education systems that are available around the world, right? If COVID-19 has shown, what it's shown us is there's a education divide. And there's a digital divide, but there's also a divide in terms of the quality as well as the accessibility to education, as well, as Shai mentioned earlier. And it's also at earlier years. It's of course at tertiary years, but it's also much earlier on. And there is this difference. And that's something we need to address, of course, as we look ahead in terms of education.
And that actually is my next question for you, Shai, because what we have seen in these lockdowns is this magnification of existing socioeconomic disparities when it comes to access, especially even just things like broadband or electronic devices. And given that you do have a significant portion of your students are refugees, which is incredible, this is a challenge that I'm sure you are very familiar with. What can we do to equalize the playing field with respect to access? And is this actually an easy problem for some governments to solve, in your opinion?
Well, it's two different questions. University of the People is a non-profit, tuition-free online university, and anyone with high school diploma is eligible to be accepted. So if you have a high school diploma and you are proficient in English, you are being accepted. Then we ask our students to take 2 courses to see that they like our pedagogy, but at the same time to show us that they meet our standards. If they pass these 2 courses, they get credit for them and they can continue their studies. The idea is to open the doors of higher education for every qualified student. So we are the opportunity for those who have none. And as such, we have many students who come to us because of hardship. You mentioned refugees. We took more refugees than any university in the world. But we have other students who need us. Not only, there are a lot of students who come to us because of the flexibility, because the combination of work and study, staying home moms, that they can't go to school, or anyone else who needs to find the flexibility and at the same time wants the quality can find themselves with us. Our model is financially sustainable. If we do it, we're not the only one who can do it. We haven't invented the wheel. We only took everything that is out there and took it. Open source technology, open educational resources. We use technology to replace human beings where it can. We operate from all over the world wherever it's cost effective. And also we lean on volunteers. There are amazing goodwill out there in the world, and we have 17,000 volunteers, people who come to us to help our students. But I think that the message is that we are there we build a model, and we are there to serve as many people as we can, and we want to show others that what we do, they can do. Because when you think about it, our professors teach elsewhere. So every university pretty much has what we have. Yes, we have the knowledge, we have the experience, but we are not the only one who can do it. Talking about governments, I think that what we do is showing the governments that there is a solution to the shortage of seats in the higher education and the cost of higher education. We are showing that higher education can be accessible, affordable, with the right quality. And you know, you're looking at some countries, and Africa, I think, is the best example. Take Nigeria as an example. There are 1.5 million students every year who pass the university entrance exams, meaning they're qualified for higher education. But there are seats available for 500,000, which means that there are 1 million students every year deprived from higher education simply because there aren't enough seats for them. And what we're saying, look at us, do exactly as we do. And you can accommodate every single student. And nobody needs to stand in the back of the lecture hall, because in online learning, there is room for everyone. So we build a model to show other universities that they can replicate what we do, but mainly governments to solve the issues of higher education, whether it is in terms of accessibility, meaning there aren't enough seats, whether it is the cost that is too high, and obviously online can dramatically reduce the price of higher education, and in terms of quality, and our quality is quite high, I would say.
But even things like broadband, and not all students have a home with a laptop or a smartphone. And what we've seen even just in this crisis is that Netflix, for example, has come and helped to improve the quality of broadband in the US during this crisis. So, the streaming didn't crash. So it doesn't seem like it's an impossible task to make sure everybody has access. And have you seen that in your experience as well?
Well, okay, to be fair, if someone doesn't have internet access, we don't know, because they can't approach us. So I cannot talk about those who don't approach us. But we have students from 200 countries. Every single country and territory on earth, we have students from. And what we did when we originally started the university in 2009, there were still a lot of people without internet access or without broadband. So we decided that we use text only. So our entire pedagogy was texting between students. It was no audio, no video necessary to study with us. So even if you were in the most remote area and your internet connection was not very strong, you can still study with us. along the years, we realized that by doing so, yes, we enable connectivity to everyone, but we punish those who do have broadband because they can't enjoy the richness of the internet. The follow-up was that we added videos. And now what we do, we tell the students, if you have video, go watch this video, go watch TED Talk, go watch a YouTube video or MIT video. But if you don't have broadband, here's the text. So we try to accommodate both. And again, as I said, we are peer-to-peer learning. So the communication between the students is text-based. Again, if two students have Skype and they want to Skype among themselves, great, they're more than welcome, but they don't have to. So there are solutions to accommodate, I wouldn't say every single person on earth, but the overwhelming majority of people do have. And just to remind all of us, and as I mentioned, we have a lot of refugees. And when we all watch the Syrian refugee landing on the Greece island, we all saw it. The first thing, they take out their cell phone and talk. You know, today, even refugees have cell phones, so it's quite there.
Yeah.
If I may just, just very briefly, because this is, I think, also a kind of absolutely related but parallel topic, but absolutely related, and this is the digital divide. And I'm saying that because, of course, I am working on that for many years. So the question is, when will we have the rest of the world, yes, join us? And we are here, we're talking from all these countries which are developed and so on and so forth. So the topic is the future of education. But I think the future of education definitely includes also this critical question, and especially taking action to solve it. And that is probably another panel discussion.
Absolutely. And I think
can I just add as well that I think this is such an important one when it comes to talking about the digital divide and also the gender divide, I think, as well. So there's both of that needs to go together as we address this. We have seen some snippets of some beautiful things happen as governments, as the private sector, as well as educational institutions come together through this crisis. You see UNICEF and Microsoft develop the Learning Passport as it's a digital learning platform. It's been being trialed in Timor-Leste and Kosovo. And I think that there's really an opportunity there. You've seen other organizations stepping forward and saying, we're going to provide laptops and tablets. We're going to provide hotspots. And this is something that we need to think about, because clearly there's a lot of, as Shai said, there's a lot of goodwill out there. It's a matter of how can we use that, not just in a period of crisis, but let's take this goodwill forward to say that, look, if we want to achieve the United Nations Sustainability Development Goal number 4 of quality education for all that's equal, we are going to have to make concrete efforts from all these different parties. It's educational institutions, it's the private sector, and it's governments coming together to say that how can we ensure that we have fair access to education. If that education needs to be online, if it is, if they need to have access to hotspots and to tablets and computers, then that's what we need to provide. And we need to make that accessible so that we are reaching a stage where, there is this lack of that divide. We're reducing that digital divide, that divide in terms of the quality of education, and I think really importantly the gender divide as well, to ensure that girls are getting as much of an education as boys are across the world. I think that's something that we really need to take on, and this crisis has really brought that up, but it's also shown the human spirit that we can come together, and we need to take that forward. And I think that's something we need to focus on and not forget once all of this is over.
Absolutely. And I think it can, though, be easier for developed countries to hide under the fact that we do have, in general, better access to technology and things. But there still is quite a digital divide amongst developed countries, just based on the neighborhood that you live. But I think the private public partnerships are something that really do need to take center stage. And in the past 20, 30 years, how the private sector has supported education is by doing things like offering co-op opportunities and internships. But maybe now the future of these partnerships means accessibility to the technologies that are going to govern these children's lives. And so it's a different conversation, but it's still the private-public partnerships. We have to work together in order for this to work. And on that note of private-public partnerships, Dr. Ulieru, one thing that we have seen, especially when we do talk about computer science in the future and STEM, and that students should have at least a bit of a grip on computer engineering material. A major hurdle, though, is that schools face a severe shortage in teachers who are trained in these computer science courses. So how do you think schools can get more access to these leaders? And is this also another opportunity for big tech to step in?
No, absolutely. And so it is, exactly in continuation to the previous speaker. It is all about encouragement, engagement of the students, especially, when it comes to girls in STEM. Of course, all my life I've been, I can say, preaching that and fighting for that through my personal example. But we have to do much more. We have to, for now, how the curricula is designed, and in many, many instances, not only in the education system, how our systems are set, they are discouraging women from participating from the beginning, including in this immersive environments, video games, and all that, in which we can actually encourage them. So I have been involved in several initiatives, I can call them, yes, which are all international and supported by foundations and by these private-public partnerships, as well as governments, to encourage and to actually design such infrastructures for women. And therefore, we need the women who are today in technology to actually be brought at the table and involved in such work, in the design work. I'm advising a new social network called Sapien Network, which actually has started an initiative. It's called WE Club, the Women Empowerment Club, that is actually engaging women in technologies and in being immersed into this. I'm really sorry about the background noise. I'm here in DC. I do not know if you can hear. A lot. Okay. So yes, no, absolutely. It is crucial. It is happening, but we need more of it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And I think, and for anyone that's listening that is in the education sector, don't be afraid to put pressure on big tech. If you need that support, these companies have massive resources and they can provide that support. And I know here in the US, schools did put that pressure on Microsoft, and they stepped up and they lent some of their software engineers to the school systems to help teach. So regardless of who kind of the leading tech voice is in your community, put pressure on them to step in. And especially when tech preaches this, this new mantra of inclusivity and diversity, it starts with developing the pipeline at an early age. And if you think that people in your community don't have fair access to that pipeline, they have to be a part of that solution as well. So I would encourage you to put pressure on tech in your community if you don't see them stepping in. And Dr. Luthra, one thing that I'm sure you're quite familiar with as an educator is that we overburden our teachers. We put so much on their plate, and now we're literally asking them to position for a world with robots in the next few years. How can we leverage advanced technologies to help support our teachers, and what possibilities does tech open for the way teachers teach and for how students learn?
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity here for some degree of blended learning at all levels. I think if we look at how and what teachers are educating students in, the large part of that is material and content that can easily be taught by an online program with adequate, feedback mechanisms put into it, right? So we need technology to step up to that and to create these kind of programs for young learners as well as more advanced learners in terms of teaching content, but also providing almost real-time feedback to students. And if we can take away from the teacher's workload this aspect of it, concepts, for example, in mathematics that can easily be taught through through an online program, then we free up our teachers' time to be able to teach those life skills that we've been talking about earlier, that this other speakers have spoken about as well, in terms of creative thinking, in terms of adaptability and flexibility, in terms of emotional intelligence, in terms of those social skills as well. And so we need to focus and free up our teachers' time rather than add on to it, right? So it's about rethinking the role of the educator. And that's an important thing that we need to question. And I think if you think about this, this is not something that we're only looking at now. Educators have been thinking about this for a while. What is our role? We find that, when you're in the classroom, we've got to add value. I know that every time I stand up in front of my master's students or my undergraduate students, I know that they have access to a lot of the theories out there. They can happily, Google it and look it up. So what is the value that I am adding in that situation? And so we've been thinking about the new role, or the redefined role of the educator. And this is possibly the direction it needs to take, that if we can harness technology to take over in teaching some of these basic concepts and theories that we need students to understand, but it doesn't necessarily have to be taught by a teacher. But the role of the teacher then becomes to be able to facilitate and allow students to really, learn those life skills, and to provide opportunities for them to collaborate and work with them in terms of creating solutions that are, cross-functional, that are interdisciplinary. That's the role that teachers need to take on at all levels, whether it's at primary level or right up university level. I think that's the direction we need to take. And so that's where there's an opportunity, of course, for technology as well. But I do want to highlight that I don't think I'm a little bit more of a traditionalist maybe when it comes to this, and a real educator at heart. And I still feel that, there is a real role for that personal interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I do believe very strongly that blended learning has to come in, that the value of a personal interaction between a student, a young learner, or a more advanced learner with an educator, that has to come in. And COVID-19 has really shown us that students really value that. Even my master's students, I have a couple of students who are doing their oral defenses next week, and we've had interactions only online, and I can feel that difference between how it's been in previous years, where we've sat down and worked through it and provided supervision face to face. The value of that social interaction between an educator and his or her student is just so precious and valuable. And that's something we shouldn't take away. We need to work around that to realize that technology can help that. And that interaction needs to be something that we hold on to. So it really is a blended system.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think I do want to make sure we have some time for questions.
Yeah, I just wanted one thing to mention here, because I'm so passionate about, and you are so passionate about it as well. So I see the teacher as a guide that actually, has a torch which can light the unknown territory to guide the students there. And actually the student is the one who is expressing, okay, let's see here, I'm more interested in this and that, and then the teacher reveals the mysteries of that territory. Thank you.
I would like to add a word as well. First of all, nobody is against face-to-face and interaction between the teachers, but I would say two things. First of all, not for everyone. Some prefer the online on face-to-face. Second, when you do, there are students who don't have the option. Mm-hmm. So what do? Face-to-face only, and if you can't make it, don't make it. So online, first of all, for some it's the best. For others, it's the only opportunity, and as the only opportunity, it's an amazing opportunity. Mm-hmm. I would like to say one more thing about the technology. Technology, especially in online, can dramatically help the teachers and reduce their work. Because, if you, and I always give the same example of us having over 30,000 students, I'm sure that every week we have at least 1,000 students asking their professors, can we submit our homework late? Here we have 1,000 instructors answering the same question, which, you know what? I'm not even sure if the professors know the right answer. You can use a robot to answer the question, perfectly the right answer, and save the instructor's time. But even more important, the technology can identify students at risk and get involved right there. and help the students stay, which sometimes you can do only with the technology and not face-to-face. I have more to say, but you want to have some questions.
Yeah, can I just add a very quick one, just to agree with Shai? I think it's such an important topic, but I think that we need to understand that there's a flexibility of learners and there's a range of learners, right? And we need to have different systems in place that really allows us to be able to access and reach as many, if not all, learners who want to learn. And that's really all of us, right? It's not a particular group, and it's not something for a certain group and not others. I think accessibility is key. Shai, I completely agree that, you know, if someone can't have access to face-to-face, the option is not to have education, but to have other alternatives. And I think it's about having the range of education, and ideally some degree of blended. But if that's not possible, then a complete online and making the most of technology, right? Look at us, we're all having a great conversation right now, and there is that personal interaction, and we're lucky we're at a time where we have technology that enables that to happen. How can we use it best? So, yeah.
Absolutely. I think and all of the forecasting maps that we do for the future of work, teachers are still at every decade, despite the rapid automation that's going to take place. Teachers are one of the only things that are actually quite constant. How they teach, where they teach, what they teach, that's going to have to be more malleable, as we've seen. But teachers still have a role in every decade in the forecast. So I think that's really important to highlight. I would like to leave some time for questions. I know we only have about 8 minutes, since I want to be cognizant of that. And there's quite a few at the side. So we'll try to see. And thank you. We have people from Haiti. We have people from Dubai. Any thoughts on getting faculty up to speed who are not familiar with teaching in these new ways?
Is that for me?
I think it could be for, yeah, I guess you would be great position to answer that one.
Training teachers to teach online, is that the question?
I think so, yeah, getting faculty up to speed who are not familiar with teaching in these new ways.
I think that, you know, every teacher can study how to teach online. It's not that hard. You need to learn it. You need to understand that the students is at the center, let the students perform, encourage the students to participate, encourage the students to interact with their peers. Your role is a moderator rather than lecturer. It depends on the platform and it depends how you teach. But in many cases, they don't need you. You know, the internet has everything. They don't really need you to give the knowledge, but they need you to moderate them, to help them, to answer questions, to motivate them. So it's a different role, but it's not that hard to study, and we do it.
But if I may say, there are tutorials, as having done it myself. Yes, so everyone who's done this in either in an executive education class before, now of course it's becoming pervasive. So there are tutorials. The platform itself is kind of telling you what you have to do, and there's this combination of synchronous and asynchronous capabilities, in which students can actually upload by a certain deadline their homework. Then there are instructors who are grading that. The teacher, the main instructor, is posting a video with the class, and then the helpers are answering students' questions as they come. So there are a lot of ways to do this, and there are a lot of different platforms. But the platform is, they are pretty, how I can say, intuitive. So yes.
I think
one thing. Can I just add?
During this time, COVID is not, this wasn't a normal scenario of how we transition online. So you have teachers kind of picking whatever platform that they're comfortable with, and parents are managing multiple platforms. But now that we have time to plan, the platforms will hopefully advance and be more developed and catered to teachers' needs. And it would be a bit more unified. So teachers wouldn't be juggling all these multiple platforms like we see right now.
Absolutely. And I think, I've been teaching for the last 13 years in face-to-face lectures and tutorials, and so my lectures went online the day after we went into lockdown here in Denmark. So it was Wednesday evening, it was lockdown, Thursday morning, you start teaching online. And of course, those are tricky times, right? You make the most of what is available. But since then, there's been a lot of resources. I think universities as well as educational institutions need to provide that kind of training for faculty. And it is, if we're asking our students to have a growth mindset and to look at things differently and to learn, we need to model that behavior as well, quite honestly. And we need to take that on. And so that's the way I'm looking at it. I've been through courses with Adobe Connect. I've been doing courses with, using various platforms, in terms of recording content as well and lectures. What are the best ways? But it's through the support of universities where they're providing these kind of training for us to be able to use a suite of tools to convey best the information and knowledge that we have. And one of the things we found is that students do prefer to have lectures pre-recorded, and then, as Shai mentioned, have the discussions taking place either in real time or on forums, with the instructor. And there's a lot of value that you can add there. Now you've got breakout rooms and all of these facilities as well available on platforms like Zoom. And so there's a lot of resources out there, but I think it requires first the instructors to have a growth mindset. We need to start that this is a new way of teaching. This is a new way of educating. We're moving towards that blended learning in one way or the other. And we need to step up and learn ourselves.
Absolutely. And I know that the panel, we only have about a minute or two. I see a lot of great questions about AR, VR, how to prepare for 2021 in a blended learning class. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to distribute these questions to the panelists afterwards so that they can still speak on it and I can make sure that they do get answered. And I'll be sending out a follow-up email to everybody that signed up today because we are running out of time. But the questions are incredible. I want to thank our panelists today for providing such a great conversation, so informative. And then for all 83 of you that have tuned in today, and I know a bunch of you have subscribed to the YouTube channel to see this recording, it will be up. And if there's anywhere that they can reach you, please let them know whether you have your website, Twitter, or
LinkedIn for me. And for the AR, VR, yes, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to talk about my dream of the holodeck as future work ground and teaching and immersions. So please contact me on LinkedIn for any questions related not only to AR, VR, but.
And Shai and Dr. Luthra, is LinkedIn also a great space for people to contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn and Twitter as well. Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
The same with me.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for everybody who tuned in today, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks.